Hi, thank you for tuning in to The Edge of Grace today. I'm Pastor Craig Becks. You know, a lot of people think that church is a lot like this room, a place to come and be criticized, judged, and sentenced. It shouldn't be. It should be a place of grace. It should be a place where God's grace is evident. So you come with us today and join me as we go to the edge of grace. I feel led. I have a word for you this morning. Be careful of what you're feeling led to. Make sure it's of God. Having said all that, this teaching is not an excuse for being foolish or reckless. When I talk about walking by faith, I'm talking about knowing in your heart of hearts that God has called you to do something. Sometimes it's your own ego. Sometimes it's your own desire. Sometimes it's your own selfishness that's motivating you. And it's not God leading you. In April of 1988, I remember we were in northern Iowa at the time, and I'll never forget this news report that I saw. It was a news report about a photographer who was also a skydiver, and he had jumped from a plane, and he was taking pictures of the numerous other skydivers and filming the group as they jumped and as they fell and as they opened their parachutes. But on the film, it shows that all of a sudden the picture on his camera went berserk. And that was because that cameraman jumped and forgot to put on his parachute. And he free fell all the way to the earth. It wasn't until he reached for that absent ripcord that he realized that it wasn't there. And you know what? Until that point, he was probably having a great time, wasn't he? Taking pictures and free-falling and looking at his buddies until he went to grab that cord, and there was no cord. Nothing could save him because his faith was in a parachute that he never buckled on. Listen to me. If you're going to take a step in faith, which I encourage you to do, I encourage you, we should all be taking steps in faith. If you're going to act in faith, if you're going to take a step in faith, then you better get buckled up before you do. When God calls you to take a leap in faith, by all means do it. But make sure that you have your parachute on. Make sure that God really called you to do it. Because faith isn't an excuse for foolishness. And you know, it's used for that, isn't it? It's used for that. Well, you know, I just felt that God, and you know it was foolishness. Let me ask you something. Are you caught in the storm this morning? Is there something going on in your life that is a storm? Then I'm going to tell you, respond to the call of Christ, because he's standing right there, right outside the boat. And I'm going to tell you to remain focused on him. Peter boldly stepped out of the boat by faith and began to walk on water towards Jesus. Think about that amazing thing. He steps out of the boat and he begins to walk on water. But you know what? His faith, his triumph over the waves of the sea turned to tragedy as soon as he what? Took his eyes off Jesus. As soon as he became fearful of the water again and took his eyes off Jesus, what happened? He began to sink. He went down in a hurry when he was no longer placing his faith in Christ. And as long as his faith was focused on Christ, Peter was empowered to do the miraculous, to walk on water. But the crashing waves and the howling wind caused him to lose faith by losing focus on Jesus. You know, if you read it and you pay attention to it, as soon as Peter realized what was happening, he immediately turned his focus back, didn't he? Huh? He stepped out of that boat, and he was walking towards Jesus. And all of a sudden he decided to look and get scared, and he started to sink. But as soon as he brought his focus back, then he came back up, didn't he? As soon as he got his eyes back on Jesus, he wasn't sinking anymore. As soon as he looked back at Christ, he wasn't scared anymore of the water that surrounded him. And in his response of faith, what happened? Jesus reached out, it says, doesn't it? Jesus reached out immediately, it says. He reached out and took Peter by the hand and brought him up. I read a story that took place in 1952 about a lady named Florence Chadwick, who decided that she was going to swim from Catalina Island to the California coast. And long-distance swimming wasn't new to her. She was the first woman to swim the English Channel. The water was numbing cold that day. And the fog was so thick that you could hardly see the boats as they sat by each other. And several times sharks had been driven away by rifle fire as she tried to swim to shore. She swam for more than 15 hours when she finally asked to be taken out of the water. Her trainer encouraged her, said, "No, you can do it, you can do it. We're close to land." But Florence looked, all she could see was fog. So she quit. 1/10 of a mile from land. Later she said, "I'm not excusing myself, but I believe if I could have seen land, I would have kept swimming." She lost faith because she couldn't see. It wasn't the cold, it wasn't the fear of exhaustion that caused Florence to fail, it was the fog. Many times we fail, not because of fear, not because of our frustration, but because we lose sight of the goal. What's our goal? 2 months after her failure, Florence went back out, walked off the same beach, swam the same distance, set a new speed record because she could see the land. She could see her goal. She hadn't lost sight of where it was she was going. We cannot afford to allow the storms of life, the things that happen to us in our life, to distract us from the one who's calling us to himself. You can focus, not on the crisis, but focus on Christ. What was Peter's method of refocusing? Well, prayer. You can't pray to God without focusing on God. Right? You can't pray if you're not focused. Well, I suppose you could, but you can't pray to God if you're not focused on God, and there's no better way to get your focus back than to pray. Peter's prayer wasn't fancy, but it was effective. Real simply, he said, "Save me, Lord," didn't he? Wasn't any King James English in there. Wasn't any these or thous or therefores or how comes. He just said, "Save me, Lord." I don't know about you, but there's times that I feel like coming in the house and hitting my knees when I come in the door and just scream, "Help!" All Peter said was, "Save me, Lord." But where was his focus? His focus was on the one who could save him, wasn't it? I almost started laughing when Danny was praying. And please hear me out now. I didn't because I didn't want to seem whatever. But did you listen to his prayer? So simple, but so profound. One of the first things he said in that prayer was, "Lord, thank you for letting us be on the top of the ground instead of underneath it." Did you hear that? Whoa! That's why I almost started laughing. Not laughing in humor, laughing in, "Yeah, thank you, Lord, I'm on top of the ground." That's kind of like Peter that day, wasn't it? "Lord, save me." That's all there was to it. Martin Luther said, "The fewer the words, the better the prayer." If Peter had chosen this moment to utter a long, pious King James prayer, he'd have drowned before he ever got it done, wouldn't he? I believe the most powerful prayer is both passionate and to the point. Say it, get it said, and keep your focus. You know, when Christ calls, you obey. When storms distract, you pray. But if Satan can't distract you, then he can't destroy you. If Satan can't get you off the path, then he can't destroy you. Satan is like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. But you know what? If we keep our focus on Christ, and we know that He's called us to do something supernatural, and we stay in prayer, and we believe in faith, then Satan can't touch us. After Jesus rescued Peter from drowning, pretty simple story, isn't it? After Jesus rescued Peter from drowning, they walked on the water back to the boat, and they got in it. And the moment that Jesus entered the boat, it says that there was a peace, and the storm died down, and everything became still. The storms of life are powerless. Are you listening to me now? The storms of life are powerless when the presence of Christ fills our lives. Now, this doesn't mean you have to carry a 32-pound King James Bible or wear 14 crosses around your neck or be the super Christian. Because contrary to what people believe, there is no such thing, because every one of us are sinners saved by grace. But the storms of life, I'm telling you, are powerless when the presence of Christ fills our lives and produces that peace in our life. The truth is, there can't be any peace in our life apart from the presence of Christ. If you don't have the presence of Christ in your life, you aren't going to have any peace. Does that mean that everything in your life is going to be rosy? No, it doesn't. Because it's not. Nothing in your life is going to be perfect. In fact, it'll be quite the opposite. And you're going to find out as you get older, for those of us that are parents and then grandparents, you know what? There's things that come into your life that you wish never would have happened, but they're going to happen, and all you can do is keep your focus and believe. When we come to Christ, Satan's going to try all the harder to whip up the storms. Because, see, he's the one that brings the storm. Christ is the one that brings the peace. He's going to try to distract us. He's going to try to destroy us. He's going to try to help us take our focus off Christ. But Christ will take us to the eye of the storm. If you've ever studied tornadoes at all, do you realize that in the middle of that spinning mess, in the inside, there is a peace and there is a calm? All of the nastiness is on the outside of that thing. Jesus will take us to the middle of that storm where there's peace. Even though the storm is raging around us, even though all hell is breaking loose around us, even though Satan is shooting everything he's got at us, if we stay focused on Christ and stay with Him and act in faith, He'll take us to the center of that storm, to the eye of that storm where there's peace. You see, we have a wrong idea about what peace is. There's a story about a king who offered a prize to the artist that would paint the best picture of peace. Many artists tried, and the king looked at all the pictures, but there was two that he finally chose, and he was going to decide between. The one picture was a beautiful pastoral picture of a calm lake, and the lake had a perfect mirror to the beautiful towering mountains that were around it, and overhead the sky was blue with white fluffy clouds, and to what we would think, that picture was absolutely the picture of perfect peace. Well, the other picture had mountains too, but they were rugged and they were bare. And the sky above the mountains was very angry, and rain was falling, and lightning was flashing, and down the side of the mountain tumbled this fierce foaming waterfall, and the picture didn't look peaceful at all. But when the king looked at it a little closer, behind that fierce, roaring waterfall, underneath those rugged mountains and far below that raging sky, in a tiny bush, in a crack in the rock, a mother bird had built a nest and was raising her young. There in the midst of the rush of angry water sat the mother bird on the nest in perfect peace. The king chose the second picture. And this is what he said. Because peace does not mean to be in a place where there is no noise or trouble or work. Peace means to be in the midst of all those things and still have a calm in your heart. That's what peace is. We got to live in this world. I had a conversation with someone the other day, a long conversation. I said, listen, you got to quit worrying about things you have no control over. There's things we can't control. And I'm going to tell you, you can live in the midst of all of this turmoil and still have a peace. You can live in the middle of financial failure of our country. You can live in the middle of political nonsense. You can live in the middle of losing our sons and daughters at war. You can live in the middle of all the stuff that goes on and still have a peace. The question is, how do we reach that peace? And the key is worship. When Jesus entered the boat, the disciples did the only thing they knew to do, and that was they worshiped Him. We can learn something important about true worship from this passage. The text tells us that the disciples worshiped Jesus not because He calmed the storm. Because when He got in the boat, that really hadn't fully happened yet, had it? It wasn't until He got in the boat that not because He calmed the storm, but because He was the Son of God. Verse 33, then the disciples worshiped Him. That's the first thing that happened when He got in the boat. Then the disciples worshiped Him. You really are the Son of God, they exclaimed. We can learn something. True worship. Are you listening to me? True worship praises God because of who He is, not because of what He's done. Now, what He's done is great, but worship is about who He is. Truly, we're to praise God for what He's done, but the Bible calls that thanksgiving, not worship. We're to come into His gates with thankful hearts. We're to come in knowing that He has blessed us. But most of all, we worship Him because He is God. Pure worship doesn't ask, what have you done for me lately? Or what's in it for me? Pure worship is a worship of God simply because He's God. When Christ calls, obey. When the storms distract you, pray. When Christ comes, let Him stay. There's still an unanswered question that I want to close with this morning. If God really loves us, here's the age-old question. If God really loves us, why does He allow these storms to come into our lives? If God really loves me, then why have I had this financial failure? If God really loves me, then why did my wife leave me? If God really loves me, then why did He let my husband have an affair? If God really loves me, then how come I got sick? 2 reasons. Reason number 1, because we bring a lot of our problems on ourselves. That's number 1. Someone said, if you could kick the person responsible for most of your troubles in the backside, you wouldn't be able to sit down for a week. And that's true. We bring most of our problems on in a lot of ways. Some of us are our own worst enemy, aren't we? The second reason, I'm going to explain by telling a story. There was a group of women that met for Bible study. And while studying the book of Malachi, chapter 3, they came across the verse that says this, and I quote, He will sit as a refiner and a purifier of silver, end quote. Well, it puzzled those ladies. So they wondered how this statement applied to the character and the nature of God. And one of the women offered to find out more about the process of refining silver and to get back to the group the next week. So the following week, this woman called up a silversmith, made an appointment to go watch him work. Here's what she wrote. I didn't mention anything about the reason for my interest, beyond my curiosity about the process of refining silver. And as I watched the silversmith work, he held a piece of silver over the fire and let it heat up. And he explained to me that in refining silver, one needs to hold the silver in the middle of the fire where the flames are the hottest, because that's what burns away all the impurities. The woman thought about God holding us in such a hot spot. And then she thought again about the verse that says he sits as a refiner and a purifier of silver. And so she asked the silversmith, she says, is it true that you have to sit here right in the front of this and watch it the whole time? The man said, yeah. Not only did he have to sit there holding the silver in the heat of the flame, but he also had to keep his eye on that silver the entire time that it was being heated. He said, because if the silver left even a moment too long in the flames, it would be destroyed. The woman just sat there for a moment. She said, but how do you know when the silver is fully refined? And his answer was this. Well, that's easy. When I'm able to see my image in it. Can Christ see his image in you? Can he look at you and see himself? That's all he wants to see. Because, the wonderful thing is, he doesn't see our pain. He doesn't see our sin. Because if we're Christians, we're in the white robes of his righteousness, aren't we? So when he looks at us, he wants to see himself, and he's there, and he's willing. Someday somebody's going to get tired of me telling this story, but I remember the night I went into surgery for my transplant. And Dr. Collins looked at me and he said, well, Pastor, are you ready? I said, you know what? Yeah, I'm ready. He said, are you scared? I said, you know what? I'm not. Because this is a win-win deal for me. If this liver works, I win. If this liver don't work, I win. The only thing I'm really concerned about are those 5 people sitting out in the waiting room. When you have the peace of God, you won't be afraid to take steps in faith. I had to trust that man with his scalpel for my life that night. I had to trust God. But you know what made it all the difference? I'll tell this as long as I live, is when he said, all right, if you're ready, let me pray with you before I start. Aren't too many doctors going to do that, are there? Refining the silver means allowing Christ to look and see us in him. Is God calling you to take a step in faith? Listen to me, my friends, do it. But don't take your eyes off Jesus. Do whatever he's called you to do, but don't take your eye. And just because you think, just because you feel led, make sure it's him that's leading you. I said to an individual not long ago, and they said to me, I feel led to do this. I said, I feel led to eat Twinkies, but I don't do it. Make sure. And we were at the fair Thursday, and I wanted to get one of those fried Twinkies. No, I didn't. I don't even. Ugh. Anyway, make sure that what you're doing is something God has called you to do. And if you are, he'll bless you. Take that step in faith. I don't care what all the naysayers say. I don't care how funny they look at you or how dumb they think you are. Do it if God's called you to do it. Are you listening to me? I don't care what's going on in your life. Let God take you, lead you, and you can trust him. Just like Peter did when he walked on that water. Let's pray. Father God, we are grateful to you. We are thankful to you We are excited because of you. And this morning, Father, we come to you and we realize that there's lots of things in our lives that aren't perfect. There isn't one of us in this room this morning that's perfect. But you lead us and you guide us and you direct us. And if we would just take a moment to place our faith in you, we could walk on water. We could walk on water. But instead we let all the junk in this world to cause us to be fearful and unwilling to take that step. I pray, Father, if there's one person here this morning that's struggling with whatever in their life, that right now, just like Peter did, they'll reach out to you and say, Lord, I need you right now. I need you to save me right now from all this garbage. And I promise I'll keep my eyes on you. Every head's bowed and every eye's closed. Let me tell you something. If you prayed that prayer just now and you made that promise, then God's going to give you an unbelievable opportunity to serve Him. But you got to take that step in faith. You got to do it in faith. And you got to trust Him. And then you got to keep your eyes on Him. Because there's going to be people that are going to tell you you're crazy. And that you should be doing something different than what you're doing. But just trust Him. Every head's bowed, every eye's closed. No one's looking around. No one's going to embarrass you. No one's going to do anything. But if God spoke to your heart this morning and you're facing a storm and you'd like to be able to walk on the water, you'd like me to pray for you this week, I'll do that. Just slip your hand up. Thank you. Thank you. I'll work on that. You know what? I'll make you a deal, though. I'll pray for you. But you got to promise to pray for me. We all face storms. But take a walk. Take a walk on water. Trust Him. Trust Him. Keep your eyes on Him. And you'll be amazed at what He'll do. Thank you, Jesus. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you for joining us today on The Edge of Grace. We're glad that you were here. It's almost Christmas. It's not going to be long. We have a gift we'd like to send you. A little book entitled Uncovering the Real Nativity. We'd like to send this to you absolutely free. All you have to do is write us. The address is on your screen, 621 Edgewood Road, Northwest, Cedar Rapids, Iowa, 52405. We'd love to hear from you. It's our gift to you this Christmas. Please send us a note. Let us know you watch. Let us send this to you. If you'd like to send us a gift to help support this ministry, we'd appreciate that too. But you don't have to. Just write us and let us know you watch. Let us give this to you. God bless you.